The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus said to the crowds, "To what shall I compare the people of this generation? What are they like? They are like children who sit in the marketplace and call to one another. We played the flute for you, but you did not dance. We sang a dirge, but you did not weep. For John the Baptist came neither eating food nor drinking wine, and you said he was possessed by a demon. The Son of Man comes eating and drinking, and you say, 'Look, he is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners.' But wisdom is vindicated by all her children." The Gospel of the Lord. Well, everybody, it seems like we get two homilies today. The homily that I'm going to give, and then the homily from the first reading. Don't need to say anything else. It was proclaimed so well. Thank you, Mark, for that. Nothing brings me greater joy than hearing readings from the Scriptures read so well. It's awesome. So, very moving reading today. I wanted to talk about the feast day today. The feast day we're celebrating is the feast of St. Cornelius and Cyprian, who were a couple of martyrs in the 3rd century. They're the same Cornelius and Cyprian who are mentioned in the Eucharistic prayer. So every now and again when we do the Eucharistic prayer 1, we have that litany of saints that is recalled. And Cornelius, Cyprian, Chrysogonus, and all these different people. Cornelius and Cyprian are two of those people mentioned in the Eucharistic prayer today. So we'll be doing Eucharistic prayer 1, mentioning their names. I also want to be conscious of people's time a little bit, so we're going to skip the intercessions today, the prayers of the faithful. Those are actually optional at every daily Mass, so we don't always need to do them. So I'm just going to skip over those today for the sake of the Eucharistic prayer. Who were Saints Cornelius and Cyprian? Again, they were martyrs during the 3rd century. Cornelius was the Pope at the time, and Cyprian was the Bishop of Carthage, which is in Africa. So something that is not really known or recognized is that in the early days of the Church, Africa was kind of the hub of Christianity. It's hard for us to imagine that now because all of northern Africa is now a very Muslim area, right? Thanks to Muhammad in the 7th century, there was a huge crusade and they took over all of northern Africa. But that used to be the hub of Christianity. St. Augustine, for example, was in Africa. It was kind of the seat of the church. So they were very significant, lived in that area. And they lived during a time of persecution under the time of Emperor Decius. In the 3rd century, he began to persecute Christians, and many Christians were martyred. And there was this problem that arose. Many people who called themselves Christians apostatized to the faith. So out of fear of martyrdom and death, they rejected God and the faith publicly to avoid being killed or tortured. And after that persecution was over, many of those Christians, of course, repented and wanted to be brought back into the church. Even many priests and bishops had apostatized. And so there was a question that arose. What happens to these people who committed such a serious sin and apostatized? Should they be allowed back into the church? And if they are allowed back, what kind of penance should they be forced to do? It caused one of the early schisms in the church. Schism meaning a division. Some people were kind of the ultra-rigorists who believed that those people should be exiled from the faith. There were people who said that priests who had apostatized, all of their sacraments they had performed before that were now invalid. So people needed to be rebaptized. And then you also had a sector of people who were the opposite of that, who basically said that, there shouldn't really be a heavy penance. They should be welcomed back without any issue. So it was a huge debate they had at this time in the church. Cornelius and Cyprian leaned against the rigorist side, but they also believed there should be a strong penance given to those people, an atonement for their sins. This question is significant for us in how we understand the church. So Cornelius and Cyprian, obviously, they came out on the winning side. But it brings a question to the forefront. Why do we need the church? And what happens when there are good and solid and devout Christians who are legitimately divided on serious issues? Oftentimes, many Christians, they think that, well, if we just have the Bible and we all follow the Bible, then we'll be united. Church history over and over again shows that that's not the case. You can have very devout Christians who have legitimate disagreements and even divisions. This division was so strong that someone actually disagreed with Cornelius to the extent that he actually proclaimed himself as the new pope. Many Christians who were part of that team, they formed their own church, and they formed their own papacy, which obviously was not legitimate. Again, that's something that is repeated in church history. This is one of the reasons why people like St. John Henry Newman, for whom our Newman Center is named after at Wabash, that was one of the reasons he became a Catholic. He was a very famous Anglican preacher, and over the course of studying church history, he realized that in order for the church to stay united, there has to ultimately be some authority, which we turn to. And we as Catholics, we're the only denomination that actually claims to have an authority like that. And so St. John Henry Newman, he actually converted because of that. The church is like a river. It's alive. There are questions and ideas always being brought to the forefront. And we need banks along that river to keep us orthodox. That's why we need the papacy. St. Cyprian, in the midst of this division, I'll close with this, one of his great quotes, when he was trying to urge all those people who had formed their own church to come back to the one true church. One of the great quotes he said, and is a great quote for us to remember today, he told them, he said, "You cannot call God your Father unless you call the church your mother." As devout Christians, we must remain in the church, who is our mother, and submit ourselves to the authority of that church.